Hey, hey, hey. Time for another Out of This World story from rSpace. The couple had what appeared to be the picture-perfect life, but, as they say, appearances can be deceiving. Today on rSpace, what happens when a marriage that seems unshakable is rocked by the one thing no one saw coming, a betrayal from within the family itself. My wife had an affair with my cousin. Now I'm happier than ever with his wife. When I, 33 male, was young, I did not have a great time with my mom. Simply put, she was abusive. But that's a story for another day. I think that's why I clung to my cousin whenever I could for some kind of security, because he was the only one I had. With my mom, it wasn't discipline or even some kind of brand of rough parenting. She'd lash out for any reason she could find. But a lot of the time, it would be because of something my cousin and I had gotten into. He didn't live nearby, but since we went to the same school, we found plenty of time to raise hell together. He caught just as much heat from his mom as I did from mine. Somehow, though, that never stopped us. It's like we had this unspoken agreement that whatever punishment came our way was worth the memories we were making. We knew the slaps were waiting, or the verbal explosions that would leave our ears ringing, but we didn't care. He wasn't just my cousin. He was my first real brother, not the kind you're stuck with because of blood, but the kind you choose. He filled the gaps that my older brother left wide open. My cousin was my partner in everything, from stealing second helpings at family luncheons to navigating the minefield of high school. In high school, I met the woman who would end up becoming my wife. She wasn't just beautiful, she was magnetic. She drew both me and my cousin in, and back then my cousin and I both had a thing for her. But being the close-knit team we were, we had a sort of unspoken truce. Neither of us would make a move unless the other gave their blessing. Well, he eventually gave his blessing. Back then, I didn't know why she chose me, though I have a much better idea of why that might have been now. We started dating in our senior year, and we were married by the time we hit our mid-20s. My cousin? He was my best man, and I remember thinking, oh boy, this is the perfect life. I've got the woman of my dreams, my best friend standing by my side, and the kind of family bonds that people envy. But you know how life likes to screw you, right? It has screwed me deep. My wife and I moved into a modest little house. My cousin lived a few towns over, but he might as well have been next door with how often he came around. Weekends were for barbecues, football, and beers on the porch. We did it all. At a point, I thought my wife and my cousin were too close, but we all grew up together, so maybe it was normal. They always had a natural camaraderie, but it started to feel different. There were lingering glances, inside jokes I wasn't a part of, and the kind of quiet that falls when you walk into a room where people were just talking about you. But I don't know why I just chalked it all up to them having a deep friendship. After all, we both met her at the same time and had a close bond with her. So whenever the suspicion grew, I just ignored it, and eventually they died off altogether because the guy got married himself to a beautiful woman named Maria, who was running a very successful business. So he wasn't around that much anymore, and when he was around, his wife was with him. Only on a very few occasions would he come alone to the house. So I'd always had a routine. Every Wednesday and Saturday evening, I'd drive to the park a few miles from home to meet up with a group of guys from the neighborhood. It was nothing extravagant, just a way to stretch our legs and exchange banter and chat over light exercises. On this particular Wednesday, though, the weather had other plans. Midway through our session, a heavy rain came unexpectedly, and that sent everyone scattering. Normally, we usually would check the weather, especially when it's the time of year for rain, and if there was a likelihood of any rainy day, we would change the date or time. But we didn't see this one coming. So for once, I got home much earlier than usual. The moment I walked in, something felt off. 2 wine glasses were sitting on the coffee table, which struck me as odd because we hadn't had company over, and my wife, Tina, wasn't exactly a social butterfly with neighbors. The house smelled faintly of perfume, which smelled familiar, but was one that Tina didn't usually wear. When she saw me, her demeanor was jittery, almost hilariously so. I caught her tossing something into the trash in the kitchen. Stupidly, I completely forgot to check what it was until it was too late. When she saw me, she froze like a deer in headlights. Her laugh was nervous and forced when I asked her why she looked so startled, but I hadn't pressed her yet. Later, when we were both in the bathroom, I pointed out that I saw 2 wine glasses out, with evidence of drinks having been in both of them, and asked if we had visitors that came unexpectedly and why she hadn't texted to tell me or even told me up until then. She just replied casually, which I now know was obviously a lie, that my cousin's wife had dropped by just to say hi as she passed by our house on her way somewhere else. That made me pause. My cousin's wife? She's been overseas for a while, handling a bit of business. Tina knew that. Heck, everyone in the family did. We were all hyped about the new development, especially since she was the backbone of her family and my cousin actually had a cushy position at her company. Nepotism for the win. My initial reaction was shock. Like, wait, she was back? Although she and I were not extremely close, she would have said something, or my cousin would have. I was genuinely confused, and before I could even dig a little further, my wife quickly changed the subject, talking about how in the mood she was, because she was feeling cold and needed some of my warmth. I stupidly let the whole thing slide, pushing myself to just see it as a misunderstanding, but the thought lingered in my mind, nagging at me like an itch I couldn't reach. But yes, in the moment, I shamelessly let it slip from my thoughts because I wanted to get some. The suspicion grew though, and later when I could finally get my cousin alone without my wife hovering around, I decided to make a move. We went out to a bar and I made sure to pay, so it was easy for him to drink a lot. If I confronted him under the regular circumstances, he might want to push me to confront my wife instead of him, especially if I had issues with her and not him directly. As I said, he's a smart guy, and as much as I wanted to ask him where exactly his wife was, he would have wanted to know why I asked about his wife's location because I never do. But I did that day. I outright asked when she had come back home. He looked very puzzled and, while shaking his drunken head, admitted that she was still overseas and wouldn't be back for another 2 weeks, at least because the investor she had gotten had advised she stay back to network with more business people. That answer hit me like a gut punch. I tried to keep my face neutral and quickly change the topic, but alarm bells were blaring in my head. The person who had visited her obviously couldn't have visited her. I waited until morning to confront Tina because when I got home, she was sound asleep. I will try to write it as I remember the conversation. Still, my memory ain't like it used to be, and I will try to enact my emotions surrounding that moment. I know you've been cheating on me. I was very blunt as I said that, and my voice came out colder than I expected. She started sobbing, almost immediately, denying it outright. "I'm not cheating, I swear," she cried. "I've been seeing someone, but not in the way you think. I've been seeing a psychologist." Looking back, it was strange that she didn't even try to inquire as to why I would have thought something like that. "A psychologist?" I repeated. I was so skeptical. "Yes. I've been dealing with depression because we've been struggling to get pregnant. I didn't want to tell you because you've always said depression isn't real, and I thought you'd judge me." I had never said that before, so now I was even more confused. I stared at her, trying to process it. Then she added, "If you don't believe me, call your cousin. He knows. I told him everything, and he even suggested I keep it private to avoid judgment." I was reeling, but decided to call my cousin. He backed up her story to my shock, insisting it was true and urging me to respect her privacy. He even told me not to contact the doctor, saying it might set her back and from her mental health journey. Honestly, as skeptical as I was, I felt like asking her question or after question, trying to disprove what she was saying, was going to end up coming off very insensitive in the event that what she was saying was true. So I decided to just tread with caution. Now, for a while, I let it go, convincing myself I'd overreacted, but something still didn't sit right. Maybe it was her odd behavior or the too perfect timing of her excuses. Whatever it was, it gnawed at me enough that I installed hidden cameras in the house, not out of paranoia, but to put my mind at ease. Maybe just to discount the other explanations that I was afraid of and to see if I could catch evidence of the truth. She had claimed that she would go to his office most times, but other times she'd pay extra for home visits. It sounded extremely unlikely to me because I didn't even think that therapists did home visits, but a quick search showed that some actually do. Nobody showed up for a long time after I put the cameras up. And, I started feeling guilty, thinking maybe my finding out had made Tina take a break from the sessions, maybe because she was feeling exposed, or she decided to seek it outside the home for good. And yes, I did ask how she was paying for it because I didn't see any bills that reflected that. She claimed that she'd paid out of pocket to protect her privacy. Everything was about protecting her privacy, it seemed, from her own husband. Months passed, and life returned to a semblance of normalcy. Not because I had forgotten, but because I needed to be sure and I wasn't going to do anything rash purely on assumption. That was until I decided to check the footage that had been stored on the SD card one afternoon. I started fast-forwarding through the clips, looking for anything out of place when I noticed something odd. In one video, my cousin dropped by unannounced. We hung out in the living room playing video games and laughing as we usually did. At one point, he suggested we play an old game we'd mastered as college students, claiming he'd beat me this time. I went to the garage to dig through an old pile where I kept my old games, leaving him in the house. What I saw next really messed me up. And I think that in all the stories I read here, people never talk about how bad seeing betrayal can mess you up. My cousin walked into the kitchen where Tina was making dinner. The footage showed them in a heated argument. The audio wasn't the best because that wasn't something I prioritized when getting the cameras. But I swore I could hear her asking about when he was finally going to divorce his wife, which I clearly remember thinking, oddly so, how any of that was her business. Remember that we've all been friends. I never, in all my wildest imagination, thought it could be anything nefarious. I only totally believed that I was being taken for a fool when my idiot of a cousin tried calming her down with a hug and talking about something to do with his wife signing over some extra shares before divorcing her. I had never heard my wife's voice as desperate as she sounded in the video, telling him that she had been ready to divorce me when I confronted her, but he wasn't ready, so she didn't move with it. She claimed she had done everything he had asked her to do. To cement it further in my brain, saving me from a whole lot of self-doubt and preventing them from ever denying it, the universe pushed them to end their argument with a kiss so passionate it looked straight out of a movie. I felt a terrible pain in my chest, but I didn't know why I continued watching. But I watched and saw him go back to the living room and also me coming back with the game after a while, smiling like the fool that I was and that I am. And then we went back to bantering as if this person that I thought was my best friend hadn't just betrayed me seconds earlier. The discovery changed everything. I sat silently for hours, my mind racing. My cousin and my wife had betrayed me in the worst possible way. It wasn't just the cheating, it was the elaborate web of lies. It clicked that the entire psychologist thing was a lie that they both had made up. The manipulation and the audacity of the only person I had thought of as more than family. Strangely, I was angrier with him than with her. His betrayal cut deep into my soul. Yes, I was close with my family, but where he was, my family didn't compare. He was my friend, brother, cousin, and parent all in one. It hurt, and no amount of words in this will be able to describe how I felt at that moment. But instead of acting on impulse, I knew I had to be strategic. If they thought they were smart, I'd outsmart them both. I first made a copy of the footage and stored it on multiple devices. I wasn't about to lose my evidence. Then I reached out to my cousin's wife, Maria, under the guise of catching up. She'd always been kind of grounded. Over coffee, I gently broached the topic of her husband. The normal questions about how married life was treating her, and even chipped in that he seemed really busy these days. Maria laughed nervously. She said it was all great and that her husband being busy was an understatement. That between the business and his trips, she barely sees him. In my mind, I was wondering what trips. He didn't tell me about any of that. Then I put two and two together because my wife had also been going on trips around that time. But it was supposedly for her work. At least that was what she told me. But at that moment at the cafe, I knew better. But to connect the dots or look for more evidence was not why I went. I wanted to tell Maria about the affair because I knew she would be more adept at what to do. So I showed her the footage. After trying my best to soften the blow and make sure she anticipated something heavy, telling her that she deserved to know the truth. Her face went pale as she watched her husband and my wife kissing in the kitchen. By the end of it, her hands were trembling and she was crying. We sat there for minutes just sipping our drinks and not talking until she asked me what we were going to do next. And that is what we discussed for hours afterward. She confided that her husband had been pressuring her to transfer more shares of her business into his name, claiming that he wanted to take on a larger role and that he'd pay for that larger slice of the pie in the future. According to her, he had tried all sorts of things to get a bigger piece, but she had been cautious from the start, though she had started to crack a little recently. Maria made it very clear that she couldn't be with him anymore, that it was non-negotiable for her, and she suggested we use her divorce as leverage. Meanwhile, I played the role of the oblivious husband at home. Tina had no idea what I'd uncovered, and I didn't give her any reason to suspect I was onto her. Instead, I focused on diverting my finances. Through my mother, I made a significant monetary gift, which I then advised that she put in an investment in Maria's business, ensuring that Tina wouldn't have much to claim during our divorce. As Maria's divorce progressed, my cousin began to panic. He tried to persuade Maria not to leave, offering to step away from the business entirely. She played along, pretending to consider his pleas, all while tightening her legal case against him. However, things moved fast because she put a deal on the table for him. Her lawyers were much tougher than his, and she presented the chance of a deal to him. If he didn't say anything to Tina, my wife, about the finer details of the divorce, and if she could confirm that before I finalized my divorce, he'd get an okay sum of money as his only severance in the divorce. Otherwise, she'd expose his dirty laundry and make sure he went away with nothing, He took the deal, the greedy bastard. When Maria's divorce was finalized, it was time for me to kick things into the next gear. I knew I couldn't waste any time since my cousin would likely get the news to Tina at some point. I really didn't trust him to entirely keep it to his word, so I put all my focus on the next move. Within hours, I handed Tina divorce papers, keeping my tone calm and detached. I told her I couldn't do it anymore and that, simply put, I wanted a divorce. To my surprise, she didn't put much of a fight. She only asked why I wanted a divorce, and I told her it was because I didn't love her anymore, and that I felt her depression thing was a front for something else. But I made it seem like I didn't know that much. She tried to act slightly concerned, but I could tell that she was all too eager to move on, likely thinking she'd be free to pursue my cousin. We negotiated a settlement before we got to court, which obviously worked in my favor. Plus, since most of my assets were tied up in Maria's business, Tina ended up with a fraction of what she'd likely expected. She still seemed happy with it though, probably thinking that my cousin would take care of her anyway. The real shock came after the divorce was over. Tina had no idea that my cousin, although well-to-do for a bachelor, didn't have the kind of money for a wealthy lifestyle they had both envisioned, thanks to his plan to pull some shares failing. However, at the end of the day, they still discussed their future, agreed on things, and they had a small and secret wedding. Obviously, when news of that broke, that was enough to alienate both of them from our extended family. My cousin knew that he didn't have the money that Tina must have thought he had claimed to now, but I think he knew he'd lose her if he told the truth. So he decided to lose one way, not both. He did some of the hard part for us. But I think it was only after they got married that he finally had the chance to tell her everything and how much I knew. It would have been exposed if she went to court with me, since I would have used her affair to get myself a better deal. But she took the easy road because she wanted out quickly. I think it was when she found out that she came to me, apologizing and begging for forgiveness. But of course, I couldn't care about any of that. I later found out she did the same with Maria, begging and begging. I ended up blocking my ex-wife on every available platform. She'd given up her marriage to a man who couldn't offer her anything. I guess at the end of the day, they had each other's love. I never got closure when she started cheating on me. Was it before or after we got married? How many times did it happen, and with how many people? Did she choose me because I had more prospects than my cousin and only went my cousin's way when his wife's business elevated him in the scheme? The truth is, when women cheat on you, you don't get those answers, even when they actually give you answers. No one is going to tell you they cheated on you 10 times in the past. It hurts, but things aren't all gloomy, so I'll be fine. Maria and I grew a lot closer during this time, and that's my favorite part of this whole debacle. But we are keeping things simple for now. We've agreed to take things slow, so no marriage is on the table for now, especially after what we went through. Honestly, we didn't force this. It came naturally, and honestly, I'm happier than I have been in a very long time. No, it's not the same thing as what my cousin did either, because we would have respected our boundaries when there were boundaries in the first place. Anyway, we're going to continue to grow together. The focus is on rebuilding our lives and ensuring we never get hurt again. Maybe at the end of the bad thing, there was really a good thing for the two of us. It's no wonder you feel the way you do, OP. Honestly, it sucks to think that while you were trying to make sense of it all, they were carrying on behind your back. The playlist you mentioned being shared between them is a low blow. It's devastating when something as meaningful as music, which you shared in your marriage, becomes part of their secret connection. Shame on them. Moving forward, focusing on yourself, what makes you happy, what helps you heal, is crucial. As much as it hurts now, this chapter will not define your life. Their choices were a reflection of their flaws, not yours, OP. Have you ever caught a partner and a friend a little closer than they should have been? Share it with us in the comments below. And thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you soon.